The empty chair. The rooftop garden looked out over a skyline that glittered with success. Executives trading laughs over expensive lunches, deals worth millions sealed between bites. And every single afternoon, in the middle of it all, one woman sat completely alone. She wore sharp, tailored suits and carried herself like someone used to being obeyed. She ran one of the city's largest tech companies. But the wheelchair tucked beneath her table seemed to draw a line no one wanted to cross. People greeted her warmly from a distance. Clients praised her instincts. But when noon came around, the seats near her stayed empty. Every time. Then, on an ordinary afternoon, a little girl with a peanut butter sandwich changed all of that. If stories like this one resonate with you, following along helps more people find them. Every weekday at 12:30 sharp, Maren Holloway wheeled herself out to the terrace of Holloway Dynamics. Same order, grilled chicken salad. Same spot, next to the lavender planter. Same view of the city moving beneath her in the afternoon light. From the outside, she looked like a woman who had it all. She'd taken her company from a cramped rented office to a global business worth hundreds of millions. The business press called her fearless. Young founders wanted to be her. None of those articles mentioned the quiet that followed her to lunch every day. Years before, a highway accident had taken the use of her legs and taken the man she'd planned to spend her life with. Recovery had meant more than surgery and physical therapy. It meant learning to smile through stairs, to run a room after people quietly doubted whether she still could, and to hear the pity tucked inside every well-meant compliment. She'd fought through all of it, but success, it turned out, couldn't touch the loneliness. Somewhere along the way, people had stopped seeing Maren and started seeing only the CEO in the wheelchair. Her employees respected her. Maybe too much. They assumed she wanted to be left alone, worried about intruding, worried about saying the wrong thing. So they walked past her table with their trays, offering a quick smile before sitting somewhere else. Maren always smiled back and let them believe she preferred it that way. Underneath, she wondered what it might feel like to just belong somewhere, without a title attached, without admiration or sympathy clouding the room. One Tuesday, a construction crew was doing repairs on a building nearby. Among them was Callum Reyes, an electrician and a widowed father raising his 8-year-old, Junie, on his own. School was closed that day for teacher training, so Junie had tagged along, spending the morning sketching birds and clouds near the site office. At lunch, Callum pulled 2 simple sandwiches out of an old bag. Money was tight. It had been ever since his wife passed away from a long illness 2 years earlier. He often skipped lunch himself, so Junie could eat well at home. He never made it sound like a hardship. He believed dignity had nothing to do with money and everything to do with how you treated people. Looking for somewhere quiet to sit, Junie spotted the elegant woman eating alone near the flowers. Every seat around her sat empty, as if some invisible sign warned people off. Junie looked up at her father, puzzled. Kids notice these things adults have learned to overlook, and before he could stop her, she walked straight over. Callum hurried after her, mortified, already rehearsing an apology. Before he could say it, Junie smiled and asked if they could sit close by, because the flowers looked prettier from that side of the terrace. For a second, Maren didn't know what to say. No hesitation. No stare. No quiet judgment, just a kid asking to share the sunshine. She smiled, surprising even herself, and nodded. That lunch lasted maybe 30 minutes, but it stayed with her longer than any business dinner she'd sat through in years. Junie talked about wanting to be a wildlife photographer, pointed out pigeons on the rooftops nearby, and invented whole backstories for each one. Callum mostly listened, laughing at his daughter's imagination and apologizing for it in the same breath. Maren found herself laughing too, not the practice laugh she used in board meetings, but a real one. It had been a long time. Callum thanked her afterward and figured that was that. But the next day, Junie asked if they could eat up there again. Then the day after. Before long, it was routine. Little by little, the conversations went deeper. Callum admitted how heavy single parenthood could feel. The bills, the homework help, trying to be both parents at once. Maren admitted that for someone who led thousands of people, She went home most nights to a penthouse where the silence felt louder than any applause she'd ever gotten. Neither one tried to fix the other's pain. They just listened. Sometimes that's the whole gift. People at the office started noticing the difference. Their famously tough CEO was smiling more. Meetings felt less like interrogations. She started asking about people's families, remembering birthdays, and pushing through new mental health resources for the whole company. Productivity went up, not from tighter rules, but because people finally felt like someone saw them. One afternoon, Maren watched Callum quietly repairing some wiring in the building, worn tools, faded uniform, but every bit of the work done with real care. She learned, almost by accident, that he'd turned down promotions before because the higher-paying jobs meant more travel and less time with Junie. That stuck with her. A week later, Holloway Dynamics posted a new role, Facilities Operations Manager, overseeing the company's expanding properties. The pay was nearly double what Callum made, with flexible hours built in. When HR offered it to him, he assumed it was a mistake. It wasn't. Maren had simply noticed something in him that no one else had bothered to. But the bigger moment was still ahead. Months later, at the company's annual leadership event, Maren took the stage in front of hundreds of employees. She didn't talk about revenue or growth targets. She talked about being lonely. She admitted that after checking off every professional milestone she could think of, she'd nearly forgotten what an ordinary friendship could do for a person. She said real success meant building a place where no one felt invisible, not because of their title, their income, or their body. Then she called Callum and Junie up onto the stage. The room rose in applause, not because someone had gotten a promotion, but because everyone in that room finally understood the quiet lesson behind all those lunches. A child had crossed a line the adults had been too careful to cross. A father had simply treated a stranger like a person. Together, without meaning to, they'd reminded an entire company that kindness doesn't need an invitation. Inspired by it, Holloway Dynamics rolled out mentorship programs, inclusive hiring initiatives, and a hardship fund for employees going through hard times. Other companies started paying attention too. What started as one shared lunch ended up reaching far beyond that rooftop. Seasons changed, and the garden kept blooming, lavender swaying, birds nesting in the eaves. But the real difference wasn't the flowers. It was the table. The seat next to Maren was never empty again. Some days it was employees. Some days interns with career questions. Some days clients who lingered longer than the meeting required. And every Friday, without fail, Callum and Junie still showed up with homemade sandwiches, right where it all started. No five-star restaurant could have replaced those afternoons. Love, most of the time, doesn't come with fireworks. It shows up quietly, in the choice to sit down next to the one person everyone else walked past. What began with one small act of kindness, a child sitting beside a stranger, ended up changing more lives than anyone could have predicted. Sometimes that's exactly how it works. The biggest changes start with the smallest, most ordinary choices.